Hello, welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast from me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with marathon dreams. Episode 99, should I get a gait analysis done? This is a question I get asked quite a bit, and I've dealt with it a few times with people, so I want to tackle it on this week's episode. So what's going on with me at the moment? A couple of things. I'm training for a half marathon in July. I'm having a bit of a go at this one. I've decided to see what's possible. I'm not sure. It's a tricky one because it's a bit warm here in the UK in July, so the conditions won't necessarily be as good as they would when I usually do races, but it's a good course, it's a good local event, so I want to have a go at that one. And then of course we're straight into High Rocks training for October, which I'm doing again this year. So we go again, which is another little project of mine that I want to have a go at, and that'll be in October. So those are the two main things left for me, and as soon as those things are out the way, of course, it will then be focusing on the spring marathons for 2027, and potentially for you as well if you've got a spring marathon coming up. So I want to talk about gait analysis because I had this conversation literally the other day, and again it's been asked a lot. So the question is, should you get a gait analysis done? If you don't know what a gait analysis is, I'll explain it today for you. Transparency here, I've never had it done, which actually is kind of the point of this podcast in some senses, because I've never felt the need to. So yeah, that's why I also want to put that out there early, because I think it's one of those things where sometimes it gets put up on a pedestal, and I don't necessarily think it's the be all and end all. So if you've ever bought running shoes from, say, a proper running shop, then you may have been told at that running shop that you need a gait analysis. You may have stood on a treadmill in a running shop and someone's filmed your feet from behind. Then maybe they've told you that you say over pronate or something like that. And maybe that you've told you need stability or support shoes. Or maybe you've been told that your running form is causing all of your injuries. Now, what I want to do today is unpack this properly, because I think there's a lot of confusion around gait analysis, what it can do, what it can't, and whether it's actually going to be worth your time and your money. Now, I'll be honest, every single person that I know who's had one of these done, there's never, the feedback's always been quite neutral. There's never been it's a magic bullet, and there's also never been it's terrible type of thing. It really depends on, again, the complete situation that we're looking at. So let's sort of go through what it is. So either at a running shop, or you can get a physio to do it as well, but usually people get them done at running shops. So it's an assessment of how you move when you run, basically. So it involves watching your run, recording that, looking at how your foot strikes, looking at your knee positioning, looking at your hip movement, and then looking at what's called pronation, which means your foot rolling inwards as it lands, which a lot of people focus on. That said, the first thing to note is that pronation of the foot is normal. Your foot is supposed to do it. It's part of the body's natural shock absorption system. The problem is somewhere along the line, pronation has had a bad rap, yeah? And you'll start hearing things like, you overpronate, it's causing your injuries, and you need specific shoes to fix that. Now, unfortunately, the evidence doesn't always support that simplistic view, and this is one of these situations where this is oversimplified. I think a lot of things in running, hopefully, from listening to this podcast and maybe following me for a while at 12 Months to Marathon, know that I am adamantly against the over complexity of runners for most runners, but this is one of those things that's sometimes oversimplified and it doesn't need to be. So a quick scan of the research on gait analysis and injury prevention is surprisingly underwhelming. If gait analysis was, say, a magic bullet, we'd expect runners who've had gait analysis and specialist shoes to get injured far less often, but that's not what we see. Now, one thing that is surprising from some research that I've done and some podcasts and interviews that I've listened to is that you can see a correlation between the increase in the use of super shoes, for example, and the increase in injuries. And this, I did a podcast on this as well. Feel free to check it out. The episode number escapes me, but it's in here. Just search for it. And basically what it is that one of the main factors, I think, is really simple. It's the fact that people think they can perform better than they can. They think they can run better than they can because they're wearing a different type of shoe, which causes its own problems. Now, that's not to say that things like a gait analysis is useless, far from it, but we need to understand its limitations. And the biggest predictor of your injury as a runner is never your gait. It's usually the top three, I would say: training load, recovery, and sleep. And then you've got injury history, sudden increase in mileage, and then running too hard too often. But I would say, looking at my own personal experience of working with people, it's usually load, recovery, and sleep that are the problems. And those will cause more injuries than your gait or your foot overpronating or whatever else it might be. So let's look at the mechanics of it. So this will give you some help if you're considering this. Yeah. And like I said before, I'm fairly neutral on it because the people that I know have had it done have never said, oh, it's magic, it does all this stuff. And the people that have also, on the flip side of that, no one's ever really said, oh, it's totally pointless. So If you go to a running shop and get a gait analysis done, let's call a spade here. Their primary goal in that shop is to sell you shoes, because that's what it is. It's a running shop. And unless they're charging you a lot of money for the gait analysis and making money on the gait analysis, chances are they're doing this to sell you shoes. So usually that will involve running on a treadmill for about 30 seconds. And that's the first thing we need to be cautious of, because running on a treadmill is not the same as running outdoors. I know this because going back to Hyrox training and some of the training that I've done, I will do some of my speed work on a treadmill, primarily because I can judge the paces better. But that said, I find that a lot easier, and I always find that interesting. I'm like, well, I'm running at this pace, and I can hit those paces outdoors, but it's a lot harder. And I'm like, I wonder, and that's even in sort of colder temperatures and whatnot else. And I always find that very, very interesting. Now, what you've got to bear in mind is that I don't subscribe to this belief that they're wildly different. So, of course, one's indoors, one's on a level, and all that sort of stuff. I know that, but I don't think it's massively different because it's still you running, okay? But there are some subtle differences you need to be aware of. Now, let's talk about the actual experience itself. So you're in the running shop. Now, if you're on a treadmill, first and foremost, you're potentially going to move a little bit differently, yeah? You might be nervous. If you've heard of white coat syndrome, which is where people go to the doctors for, say, a blood pressure test, and their blood pressure goes up just because they're in the doctors, you're going to be nervous. You might not move as naturally as you would usually. You might not like being watched. You might know that you're being watched and not move naturally because you're being watched. You might alter your stride in that environment without even realising it, yeah? So all that together, plus only 30 seconds on a treadmill, you might get a recommendation that's based on a very, very small snapshot. Now, that's like diagnosing your driving for seeing you reverse or pull into a parking space. You're probably going to miss a lot. Yeah, you're probably going to miss a lot of things. Now, stability or stroke support shoes are usually the thing that where people start to argue and people start to get contentious, as they do with a lot of this stuff. So there was a time when, say, stability shoes were handed out like sweets and everybody was going for them and everyone was taking them on board and a lot of people were talking about them. So, and everyone was being put in them. So the thinking was nice and simple. Overpronation causes injury. You got to support the foot, prevent injury, job done. Except it wasn't really, because modern thinking is a little bit more nuanced. Some runners would feel better in stability shoes, wide arch shoes, whatever you want to call them. Other people don't like them. I'm not a big fan of extra padded shoes. I don't run in super shoes. I run in sort of what I call mid-range, which are Nike Pegasus Plus. They've got a bit of foam. Obviously, they've got quite a bit of foam at the bottom, but they're nowhere near super shoes. So some runners will run with significant pronation and run injury-free in normal shoes for decades. I've never seen a problem with it, for example. Some people prefer support. So the key question really isn't, do I overpronate? The key question is, what feels comfortable, or what makes me feel comfortable and allows me to be consistent with my running, because comfort is actually one of the strongest predictions of whether a shoe will work for you. I like the Pegasus Plus. I went through a bit of a journey with running. So when I tried for my first sub-3 marathon, I tried in a pair of Nike Free. Now, if you don't know, Nike Free are running shoes, but they've got no arching. So they're like barefoot shoes, but with a little bit more support, but even still that they've got no... The sole isn't solid, so it bends. Now, I've always wore barefoot shoes around, when I'm walking around, usually I'll wear sort of barefoot shoes just because of some research I did years ago, and it actually makes my feet fit a bit better and builds a bit of strength. But I changed to running with proper supported shoes over distance because I thought that might make a difference. And lo and behold, 5 years later, I did do 2 sub-3 marathons, so there's a correlation there. And I find these particular shoes comfortable. So I like Nike, who I like to run in, and I like their particular shoes. So that's me. And what we're trying to illustrate there is personal preference. So it's about personal preference and what works for me. Okay. But I don't think about pronation is the key. So should beginners get a gait analysis? So it depends on what you're expecting from it. So if you're expecting to identify all your mechanical weaknesses and prevent all injuries, then it won't do that. So if you're expecting it to guide your shoe selection, then potentially yes. So used properly, gait analysis can be one piece of information. The problem is people treat it as the final answer. It's going to do everything. It's not going to do that. It's just going to give you one clue and nothing more. Okay. If you are concerned about your technique and concerned about the type of shoes that you wear, then potentially this could be the way. Okay. So here's what I would do instead. And this is where because sometimes people will ask me on the internet, they'll say, what shoes do you recommend? And I say, it's very much a personal preference thing. Because I run in Nike, I like Nike, but I know that's not for everybody. So if you're looking at a headline level, so principles versus tactics, which is the key thing here, first thing to look at is comfort. So it should be comfortable straight away. You should put it on and go, this is the shoe for me. Yeah. Secondly, it should fit well. Yeah. There should be enough room in the toe box. I've recently gone for half a size up. To allow for that, to protect my toenails a little bit, because my toenails are horrific, and I've noticed that actually that's having an impact in that sense. And then purpose. What are the running shoes for? Are they for easy run, speed work, racing, trail running, whatever? So different shoes serve different purposes. Okay. On that side, linking to that, I never rotate shoes, as in different types of shoe. So I'll rotate 2 types of the same model of shoe, but I won't rotate shoes. That's just me. But it depends on what you're going to be primarily using them for. If you're a beginner, then I think for me, it's going to be mostly easy runs potentially. For me, it's all about comfort. Consistency. Can you run in them week after week without injuries or issues? Yeah. That's what really matters. Can you be consistent in this particular trainer, irrespective of whether you've had a gait analysis or not? Not whether somebody draws a line in a video and says your ankle moves here or there. Do you know what I mean? It's about how you feel and what's going to help you be consistent. So where a gait analysis can be useful is there are situations that I think you should potentially look at. So if you're repeatedly getting the same injury, potentially. If you've had multiple injuries despite sensible training, potentially. If you work with a physio, potentially. If you work with a specialist running coach looking at this type of stuff, again, potentially. Or if you've got a significant movement issue, again, those are the sort of things to look at. So potentially a more detailed gait analysis can help identify patterns, not causes, patterns, okay? Because running injuries are very rarely caused by one thing. It's usually things stacking up, which again, going back to the previous point, is training, load, recovery, and sleep. So the biggest mistake I see people making, is looking for the perfect shoe. You know, the perfect gait, the perfect running form, the perfect cadence, the perfect all this sort of thing. But if you're sleeping 5 hours a night and doing no strength training and doing speed work all the time and not slowing down, then all that stuff doesn't matter. You're focusing on the 5%, not the 95%. And most runners get much better results, going back to what we previously said, by being consistent, building mileage sensibly, sleeping more, strength training twice a week, managing body weight and recovering properly. All that versus obsessing over whether your feet land in a certain way. Okay. So, should you get a gait analysis done? That was a question we asked at the start. Nice and simple answer to that, as a good coach will always answer, is it depends, but the better answer is yes if you understand what it is. No if you think it's going to solve all your problems. Use it as information, again, not as gospel, just treat it as information. Remember that comfort is the most important thing, and it does matter. Consistency matters, training load matters, recovery matters, and most importantly, the best running shoe is usually the one that allows you to be consistent, stay healthy, and enjoy the whole experience, okay? Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to have the perfect gait. The goal is to be a better runner, okay? That's the most important thing. And hopefully, that's what we're helping you to do here on this one. So, hopefully that's useful. If you've got any questions, you can reach out to me at 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram. If you don't follow me and you've come across this podcast, please do follow me at 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram for all your daily content needs. If you're new to the podcast, as always, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. That is Spotify or Apple. I really do appreciate that. Make sure to share this podcast with your friends or anyone that you feel may find it useful. And again, if you could drop me a review or a comment wherever you get your podcast from, that's really helpful as well, and I do appreciate that. So that's episode 99. Hopefully we'll crack on for episode 100. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you very much for listening so far. I do appreciate it very much, and I'll speak to you all very soon indeed. Thank you.